U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken flew to Kyiv. There he called on Russia to stop its reckless and aggressive actions towards Ukraine. Washington pledged $125 million in military aid, while saying it was looking into what would be helpful to Ukraine right now.
We'll continue to strengthen our security partnership and in close collaboration with you to make sure that Ukraine can defend itself against aggression.
The United States remained the key player for both Moscow and Kyiv. In Russia itself, the EU's role was seen as less paramount.
Maybe there were some Western European countries that wanted something different. But you follow the Americans like little poodles. I don't see any European point of view that would distinguish Europe from the United States.
On a visit to Berlin in July 2021, Zelensky made it clear that he wanted the U.S. involved in future talks with Russia. His view, Germany and France could not resolve this conflict on their own. At the same time, Zelensky worried about just how much U.S. support he could count on. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline issue surfaced repeatedly. Washington and Kyiv had previously been united in their objection to the controversial pipeline. Then Biden relented to pressure from Berlin and dropped sanctions against companies involved in the project.
Я розумію, Сполучені Штати Америки офіційно говорять.
I understand that the United States is officially saying that 95% of the Nord Stream pipeline was completed before our new administration took office.
Відповідь зрозуміла.
95% is already in place. So what can we do?
Не дати добудувати.
The answer is clear. It's a simple question of mathematics. You don't allow the remaining 5% to be completed.
Тисну.
And if the United States bends under this pressure, then Russia has basically achieved its goal and has shown everyone who the real power broker is on the political map.
На геополітичній карті.
In June 2021, President Biden invited Zelensky to the White House. Washington and Berlin proposed compensating Ukraine for revenue lost to Nord Stream 2. Kyiv objected, saying that accepting compensation would be tantamount to giving in to Russia, but it proved to be a losing battle. For Kyiv, the issue of Nord Stream 2 served as a reminder that support for Ukraine was conditional. Further U.S. military aid was put on hold until Ukraine could show progress on military reforms. The West would not engage in a direct military confrontation with Russia. The EU was divided. While Berlin and Paris tried to talk to Putin, Eastern European partners insisted Russia change its behavior first. And for Ukraine, NATO membership seemed a distant prospect. Meanwhile, Putin showed no sign of leaving Crimea or ending support for the pro-Russian separatists in Donbass. Peace remained elusive.
Je ne vois pas Poutine aujourd'hui
I don't see Putin today moving from confrontation with Europe to armed conflict.
confrontation avec l'Europe à un conflit armé.
But I don't see him backing down
Je ne
from
le vois pas
Ukraine
non
either
plus
and seeking appeasement.
reculer sur l'Ukraine et chercher un apaisement.
Ukraine had proven willing to sacrifice a lot for its independence, even when its allies didn't come through. For the former comedian Volodymyr Zelensky, the role of president was no laughing matter.
Ви точно впевнені, що це можна показувати по
Are
телевізорі?
you sure you want to show this on TV?
Я багато чого навчився.
I've learnt a lot.
І зрозумів, що
I realized that I had all that inside me.
все це
But
мені
as for the presidency, it's complicated,
воно,
although it does teach you a lot.
але воно відкриває багато речей. Я багато речей.
In 2021, Ukraine celebrated 30 years of democracy. What no one knew then is that the Ukrainian people and their president would soon show they were willing to lay down their lives to defend it.
temperature is at fever pitch. Political discourse has fallen to a new low. The economy is staring at a meltdown. The army is still going after Imran Khan. And the new government is clueless about what to do. Let me break it down for you one by one. I'll start with Imran Khan's war with the army. It shows no signs of ending. In the latest, the army has hit back at Imran Khan for claiming the country's nuclear program is in unsafe hands. Addressing a rally in Peshawar, remember, Imran Khan had claimed that the country's nuclear assets, nukes, are not safe under Shehbaz Sharif. He called him a foreign stooge who could not be trusted with nuclear codes. Last week, nukes are not safe under Shehbaz Sharif. He called him a foreign stooge who could not be trusted with nuclear codes. Last we checked, Shehbaz Sharif had not responded to this attack, but for some reason, the Pakistan army has. Look at the statement now coming up on your screen. The army has said, and I'm quoting, nuclear assets are not associated with any one political government. All political parties who have come to power have worked with full honesty to get our nuclear program to where it is today. Our nuclear program does not face any threats, neither should it be brought under political discussion. Now, this is unusual. The Pakistan army rarely drags itself openly into political battles, but this time it is openly involved in the ongoing drama. It is making statements, issuing rebuttals, indirectly condemning Imran Khan's actions. What explains the army's involvement? Our Pakistan correspondent Anas Malik decided to get some answers. He sat down with Pakistan's former Information and Broadcasting Minister Fawad Chaudhry for an exclusive interview, asking him how the PTI views the army's open rebuke of the party's leader Imran Khan. Here's what he told us.
I have with me Mr. Fawad Hussain Chaudhry, the former Information Minister for the Imran Khan government, for the former Science and Technology Minister. Sir, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to Beyond. First question, the military has now rebuked the claims by Mr. Khan, the former Prime Minister, about a conspiracy or foreign conspiracy. What do you have to say on that?
I think ISP has just confirmed the existence of latter and the internal conspiracy. I think they have just confirmed that.
So you don't think so that there is a rebuke on that?
I don't think so. They have just confirmed what we said. They just confirmed what National Security Council said. They just reiterated the statement of National Security Council, and I believe that this is what Prime Minister Imran Khan exactly used same words later on. So they just confirmed that there was an internal, in our Pakistan's political affairs, there was foreign intervention, and they also said it's a blatant one.
You heard that. The army has only reiterated what Imran Khan said. Where and when? From where we see it, the army has literally countered what Imran Khan said. But we don't blame Fawad Chaudhry. When you're no longer in power and the authorities are after you, it helps to act like you are unaware about the state of affairs. Speaking of which, the state of Pakistan's economy is only getting worse. Inflation is on the rise, the currency is in free fall, foreign reserves are depleting, and the clock is ticking. Reports say Pakistan's current reserves can only help it survive another 2 months. In other words, they can only cover 2 months of imports. The country urgently needs money. The question is how much? At least $14.1 billion as per analysts. How much money does Pakistan currently have in its foreign reserves? $11.3 billion. It needs at least $3 billion more to stave off the crisis. Where will it get the money from? Where else but the IMF? Look at this headline. The country's finance advisor in waiting says that the new government has approached the IMF for help. What does this tell you? That the government in Pakistan may have changed, but the country's financial woes are far from over. So far, Shehbaz Sharif has blamed his predecessor for this. He says Imran Khan gave him a stagnated economy. The question is, how long will this claim hold? In just a year from now, the country will be heading to the polls, and by all means, that's not enough time to fix Pakistan's economy. Simply put, Shehbaz Sharif will have to do more than blame Imran Khan for the country's woes. For starters, he will have to finalize a cabinet at the earliest. It's almost been 5 days since he was elected. He hasn't been able to finalize a cabinet yet because the coalition partners are not on the same page. The Pakistan People's Party, for instance, which is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari's party, is apparently reluctant to join the cabinet because of divisions within its ranks. Some PPP leaders do not want to take ministries and are seeking electoral reforms instead. Others are hesitant because they feel the coalition will not even last 2 months. MQMP, another party in the coalition, is also in two minds. Reports say MQMP leaders have also decided to not join the federal cabinet. It's true what they say. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. There could be no better description of Shehbaz Sharif's situation right now. He may have secured the country's top post, but given the differences within the coalition, he is going to find it incredibly tough to hold on to office. The political drama is set to continue, and we will keep following the twists and turns. We are now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.
Math way more difficult in space? We ask Matthias how and why is food in space actually spicier? Today, we are taking off. York. The artist Yediga Azizi is known for sending people back in time. With his new panorama, he recreates the plaza in front of the World Trade Center. Why is 9/11 so important to him?
Euromax. Hello guys, this is the 77%, the platform for Africa's youth to debate issues. Job.
The 77% every weekend on DW.
A review of the scale of killings in Russian-occupied areas near Kiev. Ukrainian authorities say they've recovered 900 bodies following the withdrawal of occupying forces. Police report that most of them were civilians shot dead by Russian soldiers. Also coming up, as Russia threatens a further escalation of the war, at least 7 people are killed and dozens more injured in the latest shelling of a residential area in Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv. And the scramble to stabilize the Sahel. France and the European Union have suspended their military missions in Mali. Germany wants to maintain a presence with the United Nations peacekeeping mission there. So what does Berlin expect, and what will Bamako accept? Good to have you with us. Ukrainian police say more than 900 bodies have been recovered in the area around Kiev following the withdrawal of Russian troops. Police said most of the dead civilians had been shot, an indication that many may have been executed. Bodies were found abandoned in the streets or in temporary burials. The number of dead is double that announced by Ukrainian authorities almost 2 weeks ago. Here's the head of Kiev's regional police force.
I also want to say that Bucha has the most significant number of victims. This suggests that the occupiers, the units that operated in Bucha, were the most brutal. The most victims were found in Bucha, where there are more than 350 corpses.
Ukrainian troops have been digging in throughout eastern Ukraine in anticipation of a new Russian offensive. Military experts are predicting this refocused assault on eastern Ukraine will be larger and more brutal than what we've seen so far. On Friday, 7 civilians were killed, and at least 30 wounded in Russian shelling of Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv. to our viewers, some of the images you're about to see are very disturbing.
Nina Shevchenko is crying for her dead son. She begs him to open his eyes. Then the boy's grandmother arrives. A paramedic tries to soothe her grief. It was a rocket like this one that killed the 15-year-old and dozens more civilians in Friday's attack. Signs of the shelling litter this residential area. The injured lie in the streets where they fell. Vadim Krikun was also injured in the attack. Cluster bombs exploded in the air about 100 meters above our heads. We just fell. Alina and her daughters also just narrowly escaped death.
There was an explosion. I tried to run. It fell near me. I ran. It fell near me again. Shrapnel is flying and cracking. Some woman, God bless her, covered me with her body. It's okay, don't cry. It's fine. Don't cry, my little one.
Nadezhda Alexandrova also lost her son Sergei when shrapnel from a Russian rocket sprayed through a window in her apartment. As the body count rises, shock and sorrow turn to frustration and anger. What did this guy do to the Russians? And what did a 12-year-old boy do? He was brought away dead. Did he do anything bad to them? What about the children who were injured here? And women? What about my friend who was killed? What did they do to them? With whom should we make peace? With these monsters? But as Kharkiv is located just 40 kilometers from Russia and 160 kilometers from the separatist regions in the east, the prospect of peace for this strategically important city looks highly unlikely.
Now here are some other headlines on the war in Ukraine. The German government is releasing more than 1 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine. The funds will be given to Kiev to buy weapons. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has faced criticism at home and from Kiev for his hesitancy to send heavy weapons to Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for a ban on Russian oil to be part of the next round of sanctions against Russia. In a new video address, Zelensky also pushed for a complete blockade of Russia's banking sector, saying these are necessary steps to achieve peace. Russia has warned the US to stop supplying weapons to Ukraine, according to reports. In a diplomatic note delivered this week, Moscow warned the United States and its NATO allies could face unpredictable consequences if they continue to arm Ukraine. And Ukraine is continuing its call for allies to send more heavy weapons to help it defend against the expected Russian assault in the east. DW's Alexander von Namen has been to meet members of the country's territorial defense forces who say they fought off Russian troops near Kiev with outdated weapons.
On the move with members of the 114th Brigade, part of Ukraine's territorial defense force. We are in Mitrevka, one of the villages that were in the way of the Russian invaders and their offensive on Kiev.
The convoy was approaching on the street. We were holding our positions at the neighbouring village and the highway. They came from the left. We were told to reposition to strengthen our line. Then the squadron's commander gave the order to open fire.
Lawyer, that's his nickname, shows me drone footage of the attack. The Russians were disoriented, he says. They didn't seem to expect resistance. They tried to break through, but Lawyer, with his Soviet-made rocket launcher, stood in their way.
If we'd had modern weapons, we would have destroyed them all. But we had to use what we've got. Weapons from the last century.
The Ukrainian forces do not lack enthusiasm or the courage to fight against all odds. But what they say they need are heavy weapons as soon as possible, as the whole country braces for a great battle in the and prevent more war crimes from happening. Many fear the destruction left behind by Russian soldiers around Kiev is a grim omen of what may be in store for the east. Cook is originally from the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine.
I have mixed feelings. It's hard. You feel pain, grief, but we are soldiers, so we have to pull ourselves together. We must not show our pain and fear. Our children and wives depend on us.
And they depend on each other. The worst moment is the one before the battle, Cook says. But when it starts, he adds, the fear is gone.
The United States says it's deeply concerned over violence on Friday between Palestinian protesters and Israeli security forces in Jerusalem. The U.S. State Department called on both sides to exercise restraint. More than 150 Palestinians were injured in Friday's clashes. Tensions are high after a series of attacks by Palestinian militants in Israel and Israeli security operations against Palestinians, which have led to dozens of deaths recently.
Violence at a time when religious leaders usually call for peace. Thousands of Muslims gathered at the Al-Aqsa Mosque site in Jerusalem for Friday prayers. Witnesses say a small group of them started throwing rocks at Israeli police. Police responded with tear gas and rubber bullets, entering the mosque grounds and making hundreds of arrests. Jerusalem for Holy Week. Despite violence not far away, they participated in the Way of the Cross, which according to Christian belief marks the path Jesus took to crucifixion.
Moscow says it will increase missile attacks on Kyiv. The warning follows unverified Russian claims that Ukraine carried out airstrikes on villages in Russian territory and sacked Russia's largest warships in the Black Sea. We're now getting reports of fatalities following Russian strikes in eastern Ukraine as the war passes its 50th day. Strikes sounding across the country.
to people, organisations such as Human Rights Watch and the like. That is sort of the next phase. At the moment here also, so much is being concentrated on the humanitarian effort. I mean, the city is still cut off from power and water, and telecommunications have been restored now. But obviously that is the first step, and then of course comes the documentation of all the war crimes. Yesterday I was speaking to the commissioner, or the ombudsman rather, for the Human Rights Commission, and she was saying they've also set up hotlines so that people can report. She said that was really important, particularly in the cases of the sexual violence claims, because many people were still terrified and traumatized and found it very difficult to come forward. So there are hotlines also set up to be able to take testimony.
Russian forces are now seem to be focusing their attention on the east of the country. Bring us up to date with what's happening there.
Well, that's right. Heavy bombardment or refocus of Russian efforts is expected really any day now in the east. So obviously for the last week or so, authorities have been telling residents to just get out of that area while they still can. I was reporting from down near that area on the region bordering Donbass on the weekend. Spoke to lots of people from Luhansk, Donetsk, those areas in the Donbass. Mass evacuations going on from the east and the south. But not everybody is leaving, of course. As of the other day, still around about 30% of people were staying in Luhansk. I actually spoke to a gentleman at the train station when I was leaving that area, and he was leaving too, but he was telling me about some friends of his in Luhansk that simply didn't want to leave. They were going to stick around and try and defend. They said they'd lost everything already in 2014. They weren't prepared to do it again. And he broke down in tears as he was telling me the story. Obviously, the scenes that you just saw in that report there from Mariupol, the scenes that we've seen here from places such as Bucha, everyone worried that we're going to see similar scenes like that down in the east.
That's Rebecca Ritters in Bucha. Well, Ukraine's plight has prompted offers of help from around the world, but when asked what they need most, the answer from Ukrainian leadership is always the same. So let's get more on this from Liam Collins. He's a retired US Special Forces colonel and has been a military advisor to Ukraine. He's now executive director of the Madison Policy Forum and joins us from West Point in the United States. So welcome to DW. All these weapons are pouring into Ukraine, but how long is it going to take for them to become useful for Ukrainian soldiers to be trained and able to use them to good effect?
It really depends on the weapon system and what the capability is. For example, the list of most recent aid to Ukraine included what I saw from the U.S. Mi-17 helicopters, which are Russian helicopters that their pilots are more than capable of flying. So that's something they can integrate right away. Javelin weapon systems, we started giving those in January of 2018. So again, that's a weapon you can disseminate and immediately employ. The Switchblade drones they just spoke about, those we've been training them on for the last few weeks, and so we have a cadre that's trained, but obviously not everybody out in the field, so that will take time. So it really depends on the specific weapon system and what the training time is.
Right, and so it looks like Ukraine is not going to be short of hardware supplies. How is it doing in terms of actual troops to operate these weapons?
Yeah, I mean, that really hasn't, seen a lot of news on that in terms of what losses they've taken. I mean, they're fighting overwhelming combat power by the Russians, and they're slowly getting attrited. So we have to constantly replace those weapon systems, the ammunition that they're exhausting. But right, the fighters are going to be hard to replace. But they do have tens of thousands of volunteers in their territorial defense force that can supplement that effort. So it looks like they've been able to maintain that manpower for the time being, and they just got to continue to do that.
And what are you hearing about how Russia is doing in terms of rearming and putting itself in a position to keep up this pressure? We do hear a lot about their hardware being defective and badly maintained, but they do seem to be in a bind. They've got millions of dollars coming in every day from gas exports, but sanctions mean a dwindling number of sources of technology to maintain and replenish their hardware.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, right, those gas exports and those sanctions, those are more longer-term effects. They're not going to affect the immediate warfighting capability. It's really, Russia has a large amount of stockpiles, so it's just getting those stockpiles to the fight. And as you said, some are dilapidated. They haven't been maintained, some of those weapon systems. They don't have a good logistical support system we've seen throughout this war. And so now they're trying to reposition troops that have already been, some have been beat down pretty badly up in Kyiv and Kharkiv, and they're trying to reposition them to the east. So it's going to be, a challenge to put good, capable units into the fight on the east that haven't taken significant action already.
Talk about because this is what we've been hearing now, that Russia is preparing to go at Ukraine's east and south. How do you see that panning out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Putin's trying to salvage some kind of victory, and he knows he can't get it up in the north, so he's trying to consolidate his forces and see what he can pull out of this. And so I expect to see it play out similar to what we've seen to date, right? You've got the overwhelming combat power of Russia against a much more tactically competent Ukrainian armed forces, right, that has good leaders, well-trained professional forces that are going to beat them in the tactical fight. So it's just a matter of, can Russia attract, the more capable force to a great enough level to allow them to achieve victory, or can Ukraine continue to hold off, the Russian horde with smartly timed, good defenses and smart timed counterattacks that they can do it to their advantage.
And a brief word about Mariupol. How bad a loss would it be for Ukraine if were Russia to take that port city?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a strategic capability. I mean, not in times of war, right? It's a key trading port. They need it for that capability, but I mean, they haven't had that since the war began, and so I mean, we've heard about the bridge between Crimea and the east, but it's not as strategic as people are making it out to be. Ukraine cannot, initially defend all their territory. They were going to take losses early in the war in terms of territory that they have to fight back as they did up in the north in Kyiv and Kharkiv. So that's what I would expect to see there. And Russia still, despite its efforts down there, has not been able to take control of it at this point.
Okay, good talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us, Colonel Liam Collins from the Madison Policy Forum.
Профессию воина не выбирайте, не выбирайте. Не выбирайте, она не мужская, потому что просто все. Может, вообще нет такой профессии.